Hi everyone, welcome back to this video where today we're going to be focusing on multi-dimensional data structures. Okay, so that sounds really complicated, but it's a lot more simple than you probably think. Okay, so essentially what we've covered so far is we've covered lists, tuples, dicts. The difference is that we're actually able to create lists of lists, okay, or lists of tuples, or lists of dicts. And these are really kind of handy when we actually get towards processing satellite imagery, because what we might want to do is we might want to extract areas of water from our image. Okay, I'm going to show you how to do that later in this class. And then we're going to basically save those areas of water as polygons, so shapes, geographic areas, and each shape is going to end up being a dictionary, and we're going to have a list holding all of those dictionaries together. Okay, so we have one list for the image, and then in from the areas that we've extracted, we have a dictionary for each area of water. Okay, so it might be a river system, it might be an ecosystem which has lots of different lakes, whatever. We're able to extract that information from our underlying image. Okay, but we need to know a data structure which can actually help us do this. So that's why we're learning it today, and I want us to just focus on some very simple multi-dimensional data structures here. And the idea is that, well, essentially we've already covered the lists on their own. Okay, so this area that I'm highlighting here is a list, and that list contains, in this case, two strings. Those strings, the first one is GPS, okay, so Global Positioning System, something which we all use on an hourly basis on our cell phones in order to geolocate ourselves. And the second item here is USA, okay, so the GPS system of satellites that was put up in the 80s for military purposes, then became commercially available, and now we essentially all use those on a regular basis. At least in the US we do. Also many other parts of the country, of the world, use those satellite services. Secondly, within this we also have some other lists. Okay, so Galileo, that's the GPS equivalent for the EU, and GLONASS for Russia. And essentially what we've got are these lists within a meta list, okay, so another list structure which holds all of them. And the way you could think about this is exactly as the smaller lists work, okay, so if we index at location 0, we're going to get this first list. If we index into this navsats list at location 1, we'll get the second list. At location 2, we're going to get this third list, okay? So we're able to create this navsat list here equals, then we have this meta list, and then we have each of the individual lists just separated by a comma, and then we close it with this single list. Okay, so I'm going to press Control Enter, and it prints out that list of lists that we have here to the console. It's exactly the same premise with a list of tuples. Okay, so we have tuples here, which are immutable data structures, as you'll remember. We've got a set of character strings within them, and we're just putting them in a list separated by a comma. Okay, so remember it's a list here because we've got square brackets, and these are tuples because they've got round brackets. And that gives us a list of tuples here, so this data structure which has been printed out. What's nice though is that, as I mentioned before, we can just index into them. So for the navsats list in location 0, we get the first item, location 1, we get the second item, location 2, we get the third item. Okay, so it should be reasonably straightforward for you to actually access that information. If we have this item at location 0, at the 0 index location, we can also index into this list as well. So we could even go with a square bracket here, and it would go and get this item, which is the first list in the list, which is this one, and then it's the when we get the first item within that list. Okay, so when we print it, we get just the GPS part. So hopefully you can start to see how we can string together data structures where we access individual components within this larger list. We can then go down and access specific items within each one of those smaller lists. And we can also use for loops, as I kind of quickly covered in the previous session. So you'll remember that for loops start with the term for, which is a protected argument, protected name, which is why it's highlighted in green just here. And then we're going to say for I I just being, you know, a letter like A, B, C, X, Y, Z, something that we use often in programming to refer to a variable name. And we're going to say in, and then we're going to say the navsat list, and we're going to print that I here, and we're going to have 4 spaces as the indent or a tab. Okay, so it's tab indexed. It's going to print each one of those individual items. We could even go for I0, and it's going to just print the first item of each of these lists, okay? Or you could do index location 1, which is going to print the second item of each of those lists, okay? So hopefully by just playing around with these little bits of code, you can see the difference each time, whether we're just printing an individual list, or whether we're indexing to get the first or the second items within each of those lists. It's the same for a tuple list. We can index it in exactly the same way. So here we're just indexing using our normal indexing approach, and we're placing the item index that we want using a numeric item. So we can iterate over all of them again like a normal list. So this is our navsat tuple list, and we're just basically saying exactly the same again. So we just want to print I for each item, so each tuple that we have within this list of tuples. And here it's just printing out. And we can do the same again. We could index into a certain part of the tuple, the first part of the tuple, the first item of the tuple, or the second item of the tuple, whichever we prefer, using our normal indexing. So hopefully you can see that we can print each of those items within the larger list, and then we can access either the first element or the second element within each of those tuples. We can then start to even include some additional logic in our loop. So let's just do a normal for loop. So for I in navsat tuples, which is what we already did above, we could then use a tab or 4 spaces, and we could say if the second item in that tuple is equal to, and so for equal to, when it's a logic, you need double equals, and we say, let's say if it's equal to USA, then we wanted to print the first item in that tuple, okay? And when we do that, the only thing that it's going to match here is the USA entry, okay, for the satellite navigation constellations. And therefore, it's only going to print GPS, because that's the USA satellite navigation system, okay? So we're able to print GPS there, just using a little bit of logic from our for loop. Okay, so hopefully that wasn't too much information for you. What I'd like you to do now is to kind of close off this video and then to go to the exercise which I'm creating. So for example, here what we have is our first question. Go through each one of them, attempt your answers, and now I'm going to go through and give you the answers as I see them, okay? Great, so hopefully you've all had a chance to pause the video. Now what we're going to do is we're going to answer this first question. So how do we create a list of lists containing the following 2 lists? So let's start by creating a list of lists. My list of lists equals, I'm going to make it a list to start off with, that's the meta list. So I'm going to create a square bracket and I'm going to press enter. And now what I need to do is I just need to enter this first list here, make a comma. So it's a list of a list, it's going to need a comma separating any data structure item, and there we go. That should be sufficient now. It's going to print out our list of lists down here. You'll notice that you don't actually need this second comma here, but so basically Python usefully ignores this, but it makes it so that if you want to like copy lines of code many times, you don't have to fiddle around with the actual commas or not at the end of each list. So it's just being useful for you. So there's our list of lists. Hopefully you managed to get that one. This time around what we want to do is we want to actually append this particular list to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go my list of lists dot append, and we're going to go 3.4, and this time we've got the list of lists and we've appended our new list which contains the values 3 and 4 to it, okay? The trick is here, I said append, and therefore that's indicative of what the function is to add a list to an existing list. Or in this case, just add any object to an existing list. Okay, we covered that before in the lists section. Now let's actually use a loop to print the contents of our list of lists. So remember, we need a for loop. So we're going to start by saying for my list in, okay, remember for my list is going to be the variable name I give for each individual list we're going to print. I'm going to say in, and then we give it the meta list of lists, so my list of lists. And then here we just put a colon at the end of that loop, sorry, at the end of that for loop line. And then we press enter, and it conveniently already puts the tab spacing in for us. Actually 4 spaces it's put in. And now we can just go print my list, and it's printing each one of those individual items, so each one of those lists within the meta list of lists. Okay. Can now do the same for a list of tuples. So let's go my list of tuples equals, and it's going to be a list, so let's put square brackets. Now we're going to put our round brackets, our round parentheses for these tuples. So it's going to be 1, 2. We're then going to need a comma to separate these, then use another set of round brackets, 2, 3. Okay. So that should now be our list of tuples complete. I'm just going to print it to the console. Okay, so hopefully you were able to create that data structure using those 2 tuples that I provided. Now I want you to append to this list. So essentially my list of tuples is going to use the function dot append because it's a list, and we're going to say 3, 4, we're going to print that, and basically we managed to append that tuple into our list of tuples and then just print it again to this console line here. Now let's just try to loop again over the contents of that list of tuples. So we're going to need a for loop, so we go for my tuple in, and then we're going to say my list of tuples, because that's what we've got as the name of our list of tuples. We're going to put a colon, and then we're going to press enter, and that's going to take us on to the next line below. It's already placed our 4 space indentation, and now I'm going to say print my tuple. Okay, and it's just going to basically tick over each one of those individual tuples within the larger meta list of tuples. Okay, and hopefully that's given you a good introduction to multi-dimensional data structures. So you covered some really cool things just now. You covered lists of lists and lists of tuples, and you were able to add things into those data structures, new items of information, and you're able to print them in different ways. Okay, so you're able to access that information within either the list of tuples or the list of lists. Okay, well, thanks for tuning in. It was great that you were able to tune into this particular session, and I'll see you all in the next tutorial. Thank you.